it's a huge honor to welcome to this virtual TED stage His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Ghani.
Well,
Dr.
thank
Ghani,
you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's thank you for coming and spending this time with us. You are facing issues that almost no one else on the planet is having to face. Help us understand your country, Dr. Ghani. The New York Times, in a recent article, described Afghanistan in this language: the impoverished Central Asian country, once unfamiliar to many Americans, that is now symbolizes endless conflict, foreign entanglements, and an incubator of terrorist plots. How would you describe Afghanistan?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for your great interest in Afghanistan and for your friendship. And my deepest sympathies to New Yorkers. My wife and I spent 5 years. Our children were born there, so it's our deepest sympathies and empathies. The New York Times catches one side of the story. Let me tell you the other side. Since I've become president, I've been 89 times to the provinces. Before Corona, I averaged seeing 4,000 of my fellow citizens a month. What do I hear from all Afghans, from all walks of life, men and women, girls and boys? A quest for normalcy. We are striving to be normal. It's not we who are abnormal. It's the circumstances in which we've been caught. We are hit by turbulence, left, right, and center, and we are attempting to carve a way forward to overcome the types of turbulence that in interaction with each other provide an environment of continuous uncertainty. So our goal is to overcome this, and I think with the will of the people, we will be able to. May I tell you some stories?
Please.
19 years ago, when I returned after 24 years, I couldn't find 5 people to write. We had lost our language, all our languages. Today, in poetry, in prose, novels, to penny novels, to literary criticism, the country is vibrant. It's one of the greatest conversations that is happening, and people are engaging each other. Just 2 epic poets, one called Arzu in Dari and one called Lewal in Pashto, have produced literature that I think will be read for the next 400 years. Women. We endured a gender segregation like none, but today the women of Afghanistan speak for themselves. They are ministers, they are ambassadors, they are in all walks of life. But particularly what moves me is young girls. Before Corona, I used to see them every day. And you know what they would say? Half of them want to be president of Afghanistan. That's a different Afghanistan. And this quest for normalcy is what I'm determined to put into practice and create the conditions. The other example, we were hit by Corona in February. For the first 2 days, there was a panic in the market. Prices in Kabul doubled. Within 24 hours, we brought it down. It's a functioning market that can reach almost anywhere. In 2002, every province, every center of a province was a satellite of a neighboring country. There's a lot that's happening positively. It's what is characteristic of our people is the will to overcome the past and to move forward. And I hope poverty is real, inequality is real, but we also have a very determined population that embraces the notion of the republic and the notion of citizenship. You know us, we are egalitarian. We don't bend to each other. We all need to persuade each other.
Well, I spent several years in Afghanistan as a child, and certainly experienced that determination of there's a real depth to so many Afghans. It was really striking. But this war, Dr. Ghani, it's been 19 years, I guess, since this war began. It was waged as a response to a terrorist incident in which something like 3,000 people died. The war has cost $2 trillion, perhaps 100,000 lives, mostly Afghan. Has it been worth it?
Well, the first issue is that the cost of the war is vastly exaggerated. Professor Anthony Kortzman has written an excellent paper called The True Cost of War. The Afghan war has become an omnibus under which everything from Navy to the Air Force to the other is costed. But the cost in life and treasure has been very real to the United States. Fortunately, since I've become president, the cost in life is under 100, while it used to be over 2,300. And the cost in treasure, again, has come down. Let's leave the judgment of whether it was worth it to the historians, because I don't want to discuss the past. But in this moment...
The cost, I mean, there's been 100 American lives lost, but many Afghan lives continue to be lost.
Of course, I was bringing it to the American perspective. No, we are the ones who are dying. And because of that, I'm determined to move forward with peace, and the stars are finally being aligned. The war will go on unless we find a political solution. Keeping the war going on does not require more than $60 million a year. But the real courage, the real imagination is to bring peace. And at this moment, we should be really focused on finding a political solution to end this specter that is haunting our lives.
So the US and the Taliban reached this provisional agreement, I guess, in February to reduce violence. Was that a productive agreement? And do you see it leading to this agreement between the government of Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, and the Taliban in a way that can bring actual peace?
Well, first of all, let me again say thank you to the US for the sacrifice in blood and treasure. Veterans have served in Afghanistan. They've lived with memories of this country, and it really, I'm moved to tears when they tell me they've left a piece of their heart in Afghanistan. And to the Gold Star families who've lost their loved ones. At this moment, US and interest Afghanistan and perspectives are aligned. Because the end state, the ultimate goal, is a sovereign, democratic, united Afghanistan at peace with itself and the world. Within that, we need to bring Taliban are a fact of life of Afghanistan. You cannot do away with it by force. Nor can they do away with the security forces and the will of the people of Afghanistan. So we need to find a political solution. In this environment, I think we're moving forward to creating the conditions for a direct dialogue between the Taliban and us. And this phase will hopefully move us to an Afghan-owned and Afghan-led peace process where we need to make peace. The reduction of violence is had two aspects. In terms of massive conflict, that has been reduced, but the cost in lives is still very high. On average, 30 to 35 casualties a day from our security forces, up to 70 fatalities, and up to 70 casualties. So it's imperative, particularly in the environment of Corona, that we go for a humanitarian ceasefire and start in Afghan. The condition that Taliban prisoners be released and our prisoners be released is moving forward. I'm hopeful that soon we'll begin direct talks.
What is at stake if the remaining US forces are withdrawn before you have a peace agreement in place?
Our security forces are doing 83% prior to the ceasefire and reduction of violence, the operations. So the number of US forces is now down to about 8,600. The question is not what will happen to us. The US should consider what will happen to it in terms of the ongoing threat of terrorism. We do not comment on the sovereign decisions of the United States. I asked President Trump 2 years ago that any schedule of withdrawal that he chooses, of course, is acceptable to us. The support structures are important. A gradual, systematic, condition-based approach would be in both our interest, but should that happen, of course, the responsibility for defending Afghanistan and for securing it lies on our shoulders, and I'm delighted that every single member of our security forces is a volunteer. There's no one conscripted, there's no one forced, and our special forces are second to none in the region, and our Air Force has been tripled. We'll be able to maintain ourselves, but it could change, it could adversely affect the chances of peace, and I hope that we will be able to move forward so it is a systematic process rather than a sudden process.
Many Afghans, I believe, including you, reject the Taliban's strident interpretation of Islam. I mean, when values are that different, is there any real prospect of long-term stable peace?
Well, again, I hope you remember President Lincoln's statement. A woman was criticizing him for making peace. And he said, you're making peace with your enemies. He said, isn't the best way of turning the enemies into friends? So first is the story of ceasefire of 2018. Tens of thousands of Taliban mixed with the rest of the Afghans. You know, there wasn't a single incident of lynching or spitting or insulting of the Taliban. Our society is a consensus on making peace. Our values need to be reframed from war to peace. In the environment of war, values become more pronounced towards violence. You've seen everywhere the veterans, their problems, no matter what type of country they come from, the post-stress disorder, etc., are a common phenomena. So here, peace must be mapped properly. I've spent a lifetime studying peace processes, over 100 agreements in preparation. There are good peace processes and there are bad ones. Process matters. The key is what's the goal and how to reach agreement, and then to give the implementation sufficient time. The key to future values is removal of arms from dictation. Once we interact, I think we will be able to renew our bonds, because in the past also we've had periods of radical versus tolerant. Our tradition, you know, is Maulana of Rum, famously known as Rumi. And he has a verse that I'd like to cite. He says, with will, fire becomes sweet water, and without will, even water becomes fire. This is not easy, but it is necessary. And the last issue, who's the winner of the war? There is no winner. But who's the winner of the peace? The people of Afghanistan and the people of the region. We should all acquire the humility to say that we will put our people first and really arrive at ways. And you know us, we have several thousand years of ways of mediation, arbitration, coming together. There's a large repertoire for peacemaking, and I hope we can mobilize it and use it.
Yes, there is this extraordinary tradition in Afghanistan of face-to-face meetings, jirga meetings. When I had the great honor to stay in your home 8 years ago when I was in Kabul, the centerpiece of your home was this beautiful area of a rectangled area with a lovely carpet and back support so that 20 people could kind of sit in a circle. Well, it was really a rectangle, but facing each other. And I witnessed you having these face-to-face conversations with people, some of whom disagreed with you, some of whom supported you. The power of that was extraordinary to witness. Can you see a time in the next three to 5 years, say, where you will sit in a circle face-to-face with Taliban, perhaps, and try to bridge and get to a point of understanding? Is that imaginable?
Absolutely, not within 3 years. I hope within 3 months. We are determined to move forward with this opportunity. This is a window. It's a narrow window. It can shut, but we want to open it. And what you saw in my house, I've done in presidential grounds with thousands of people. Prior to Corona, I saw about 4,000 people of Kabul to discuss the city of Kabul and the province of Kabul. For 6 weeks, 600 to 800 people were coming. We are an egalitarian people. We cannot be dictated, we can only be persuaded. And persuasion means that all policies have to be done from ground up and then top down. That's the combination. Things that are borrowed uncritically will only produce counter reaction. We have a saying, you can persuade an Afghan to go to hell, but you cannot compel him to go to heaven. He has to be persuaded.
That's a good saying. The final series of the TV show Homeland was located in Afghanistan and featured tense negotiations involving the US, the Afghan government, the Taliban, Pakistan. Did you see that series, and did it bear any relation to reality?
Unfortunately, no, not. I'm a compulsive reader, but I don't watch. My 16-hour days don't allow. But let me take the question. Peacemaking is no longer just an amateur art form. It really has become a discipline. Two of my friends that have been working very closely, William Morey and Jonathan Powell, have done an enormous amount to turn this into discipline. The German Berghoff Foundation, there are others, in particular a recent book on Kissinger's diplomacy, distinctively. William Morey has come with two concepts. One is called BATNA, or the best alternative to negotiation. We need to understand that if you reduce the option of war, peacemaking will move forward. The second is called the zone of possible agreement. We have to have an approach to bridging. And there is work at the table, there's work off the table. The work off the table means bringing the region, the international community, other key stakeholders. My own take from this is we need, if we define the objectives, instead of moving blind forward, to have what is called the end state or the objective, then we can avoid a lot of those tensions and others. Because the classic, now the biography of late Holbrook is there, was the act of improvisation. This is not jazz. It is discipline. We need to have a lot more discipline so the instruments come together and the voices could come around. The key is Afghans have had a very strong sense of nationalism and identity. It's time to bridge our gaps and come together and create a common future. That is not easy, but it is absolutely imperative.
Speaking of which, you've fought two disputed elections with Abdullah Abdullah. He is now leading the High Council of National Reconciliation, I guess playing a key role in the negotiation with the Taliban. Have you been able to build a productive relationship with him?
Absolutely. We have a saying in Pashto, says, "Khula ham kala da ham bala." Says, your tongue is either a fortress or a curse. Maulana puts it better, O tongue, you're an endless treasure. O tongue, you're also an endless disease. I've never responded negatively to Dr. Abdullah, either in the course of 2014 or 2019 campaign or during the years. We've resumed a very productive relationship, and we're meeting with mutual respect and courtesy. It's also the question that now is not the agreement of the government of national unity. Dr. Abdullah has no role directly in running the government. I'm blessed with colleagues, Vice President Saleh, Vice President Danish, Mr. Ghazanfar. The role is, of course, his colleagues will be participating in the cabinet, but this is within the peace is an area of agreement within us, because the two key parameters are, one, we should secure the participation of the Taliban within the republic. Second, elections must be the ultimate determinant of the future of leadership in Afghanistan. Dr. Abdullah and I share common ground, and we are working well together.
Can you help us understand the key issues at stake in your relationship with Pakistan? Specifically, do you feel that they're doing enough to put pressure on the Taliban to properly engage in the peace process?
Well, until the visit of the Chief of Staff of Pakistan's Army, General Bajwa, to Afghanistan, there were uncertainties. And the past, I don't want to discuss, everybody knows. And mutual suspicion, etc., etc. Now we think we are converging on a shared vision. In that, the first component of that is that a stable, democratic Afghanistan, and hopefully prosperous, is necessary for Pakistan to be stable and democratic and peaceful. Second, that ways of the past to think that Afghanistan is a part of strategic depth or a satellite of Pakistan are not possible, not feasible. So here, convergence on a sovereign, democratic, constitutionally run Afghanistan is important. We, on our part, are clear. I've articulated a new doctrine of our foreign policy. I call it multi-alignment. Maximum number of friends, minimum number of opponents. We don't want to be part of the disputes of our other partners. We will not permit our soil to be used against others, but we will also expect that others will not use their soil against us. I think that Pakistan's internal reflections make this a possibility. The Taliban have frankly been a cost to Pakistan without considerable benefits. And at this moment, the other issue is that regions develop, not countries. So India is going to be having a very important issue for our economic well-being, and we for linking Pakistan to Central Asia and Caucasus. The areas of convergence are becoming much greater than divergence. In words, we've made a lot of progress. We hope that this would translate into a very positive role. That positive role is what we ask for, because competition among nations, and particularly post-corona environment and the environmental crisis that South Asia faces, is going to be a lose-lose. While Pakistan has made calculation, if there were peace in Afghanistan and our joint connectivity, regional connectivity agenda were realized, there could be up to 2% additional rate of growth in Pakistan.
We're going to have questions from the audience in 1 minute, but you mentioned coronavirus there again. Talk about what you're wrestling with there, because in a country with a lot of poverty, the decision on how much you shut down, that's a harder call to make than in a richer country. How do you come up with the right strategy to fight this? What have you been doing, and what do you need from the rest of the world to help that fight be better?
Well, the first is we were one of the first countries to become fully aware. And this is really thanks to our Emirati friends. In January, Sheikh Tahnoun shared a briefing. I was giving a keynote address in Abu Dhabi. He was the first individual to use the term the corona economy and had full analysis developed in terms of scenarios. Their future orientation was. So when the first cases in Iran happened, we prepared. Mr. Anderson, we were having from February 24, the first cases, to March 21st, Nowruz, up to 10,000 people a day coming from Iran. There was a panic among Afghans in Iran, so they rushed. We moved in to analyze the phases. So there are 5 phases: awareness, diffusion, adversity, relief, recovery. The exact timing, of course, was unknown, but we responded with lockdowns, which brought both structural hardship and situational. But compared to all others, figures, given that we don't have testing and tracing, unfortunately, the United Nations agencies have not been able to deliver on the promises, even though the money came from the World Bank. They have had constraints. Total deaths have been 491 until now. In the phases of diffusion, were slow. We had very little till the 3rd week of May. The last week of May, adversity started. So now we are in a phase. The other part of it is we started distributing bread for the first time in our history to all our cities. Now we are doing a major program shortly of distributing a package of basic food to almost 90% of the Afghan population in several phases. Affordability is an issue for us. But in terms of what we ask, it's knowledge. It's sharing of experience, and from the philanthropic community, it's sponsor an Afghan family and work with us through knowledge networks, because now we have the capability through the digital system. I'm consulting more intensely because of the telecom capability all across Afghanistan. If we can work together, because what makes us special for a study? One, we are at the gateway to Central Asia into India, to the subcontinent, Pakistan and India. So in terms of diffusion, it's not a nation, it's an entire continent that is at issue. Second, the number above 60 is only 3% of the population. So we have one of the youngest populations. How profiled it works. And then the urban is about 30%, rural is 70%. This profile, I think, would allow for the type of working through solutions. Our main challenge is going to be winter. If Corona continues to the winter, then given our small houses and our traditions of thousands of years of eating food together, breaking bread together, will become an obstacle. So working through in here, particularly women, in women-led households, if particular needs, in working with us through globally to be able to mobilize for this. Our society is mobilized with enormous generosity. People have really shared half of the bread in the private sector. It's been marvelous in terms of both contributing to the market stability, but also with the deep sense of charity. If it could be joined with regional planning and global coordination, particularly when the vaccine comes, that we are not forgotten because we will not be able to pay early.
I'm hearing you say there could be a national strategy in response to COVID-19. I think there might be a few countries who might want to borrow you for a few months, Dr. Ghani. We're going to go to we're going to go to questions from the community. Let's get the first one up there. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, Dr. Ghani. The peace process is a triangulation between your government, Taliban, and the US, but others have economic and political interests in Afghanistan, China, for instance. What is the role of China in Afghanistan today?
Thank you. The answer is this. The coalition for war was limited. I hope to put the broadest coalition for peace. Everybody can be a winner in peace. China is a very significant neighbor. We have a small border, but very significant. China's market is essential for us. Thanks to Uzbekistan's opening to us, which I'd like to thank President Mirziyoyev in particular, we now reach China in a week. It used to take us 3 months. In terms of investment, Afghanistan wants to be a location for investment. China, should it wish, in terms of the peace process, we would like the discussions of the peace not to take place in one country, but to move, so we can have the maximum number of stakeholders. The most significant thing is what I put to President Xi during the Shanghai conference, and he immediately endorsed it. We want to be a platform for regional and global cooperation, not a site for rivalries. That is in the interest, and China, lastly, is a major stakeholder in containing terrorism, because the threat to that is felt real, and it's an area of cooperation.
We'll take one more community question. It's an honor to hear from you today, President Ghani. Thank you for the foregrounding that peacemaking is a discipline. Can you share more about how every human being can actively practice the discipline of peacemaking in our daily lives and in our nations?
Absolutely, because the first thing is mutual respect. You know, two types of conversations have been differentiated by Professor Argyris, one of the key practitioners of this. One is called type 1 listening, where one just repeats one's position and doesn't hear the other side. Type 2 is to really have a conversation where we listen. What is in shortage in our daily interactions is capacity to listen. We talk too much, we listen too little. And this is crucial. Second is our basic humanity. When all forms of differences are socially and culturally constructed, there's no such thing as ethnic or linguistic or racial ground. Franz Boas, the founder of cultural anthropology, demonstrated through measuring heads and noses that migrants, Italians and Irish, against whom there was enormous prejudice, were not different. So it's important. Second, hierarchy and participation need to be balanced. A lot of things need to be done by community. I'm delighted, for instance, that as an architect of a program called National Solidarity, now the Citizen Charter, Afghan villages now have 50-50. 50% of our village councillors are led by women, 50 by men. Gender is an extremely important area because women bring a new perspective, an enriched perspective, and we are complementary to each other. It's finding common ground that allows us to live, because a lot of times, particularly within ideological communities, whether religious or secular, small differences are exaggerated to such an extent that makes hearing each other impossible. Now I hear the word tribes, mutually exclusive, through their digital systems applied to the United States. It's such a tragedy. We need to move forward. and come together.
Dr. Ghani, as a boy, I remember just the beauty of Afghanistan. I remember walking by the incredible blue lakes of Bandi Amir, skipping stones because there's all this flat slate there. So many deep memories. There are parts of Afghanistan that tourists have no idea about. Is there any prospect that in the next years that they will have a chance to visit again in peace and confidence that they will just have a beautiful experience in a beautiful land?
I very much hope so. During my 6 years, I've had a 2-hour break, and that was in Bandi Amir. And you remember the warm springs too, because it's a combination of intensely cold water plus these warm springs that makes it a delight. We're expanding. In one of my quests is for carbon trading to reforest Afghanistan. I think we could go probably to up to 500 million trees. That would be an enormous change in the lives of people and those people who are part of the initiative of 1 trillion trees, the firms and others we invite them. But also in Kabul, in Parwan, in Herat, in Kandahar and others, we have done an intense work to renew our cultural heritage. You remember Paghman, the valley about 20 kilometers west of Kabul. Its villas, its structures from 1880 to 1930 were ground to dust. Its gardens had been destroyed. We've restored everything, and now it's a national park. We are expanding this, and my goal is to create 1 national park in every single of the districts of the country. The beauty is truly moving. I've been to every single province of Afghanistan from 5 times to 20 times, and I'm moved by the sheer beauty of what's there, and we hope to share it. We could have up to 2 million tourists a year if we had peace.
And can you comment briefly on what the business opportunities are in Afghanistan? What kinds of investment or entrepreneurial activity would you welcome?
Well, first is the power sector. Pakistan needs probably around 50,000 megawatts of power. This is the World Bank calculations for its 100th anniversary to move from a lower middle income to an upper middle income country. In Central Asia is the key. So power, we've created all the opportunities for the private sector to be in transmission, in production, in distribution. We also have this amazing potential, 220,000 megawatts of solar, 80,000 megawatts of wind, and 23,000 megawatts of hydro. Coal, we are not touching at this moment. So power sector, second, or pipelines. Natural gas going to India is crucial, not only just Pakistan, but beyond to India. Getting here is insurance and guarantees. Working on insurance and guarantees is the crucial enabling mechanism. The second area is mining. We have the largest iron deposits, one of the largest copper deposits. In gold, we'll be a player. In talc, we can be one of the 10 players. We have over 1 billion tons of marble of 40 colors. We could, just to China, we could have an export of $1 billion a year. Precious stones, again. Gas is beginning to look very good. Oil could be sufficient. So small and medium type companies that take risks and look for high rewards. Agriculture is beginning. We have just surpassed $1 billion in export. I was able to double our exports. We have created now the infrastructure and in the systems. And equally, the digital economy is the future. So digital services, we are focusing completely on the new economy to be able to create jobs. And as I said, the other is environment. Water, we are harnessing 6 billion cubic meters of water just in our western borders. But altogether, we have to harness about 22 billion cubic meters. Environmental crisis in South Asia, in Central Asia, and West Asia is not a warning. It's a forthcoming reality. Water in water management is going to be an extremely big issue of coordination. And the other is the railways. Transport will be crucial because we missed the 19th century transport revolution. We privatized the fiber optics. We're looking every area where regional, national, and global firms will come. We are interested. And the last point is that don't look at the Afghan market. Look at it as a platform for regional cooperation, because we have one of the lowest tariff against for our exports to China, to India, to Europe, and others. The key is value chains and supply chains, and anything that can be done there. And you have one of the youngest populations on earth with willingness to work extremely hard for good money, and an entrepreneurial population to boot, that you understand.
Dr. Ghani, alas, we are out of time. I thank you for this vision. It's an exciting vision of what Afghanistan could be. I've just, whenever I hear you, I'm struck both by your eloquence and your courage. You know, you've lived all these years under threat of assassination, I guess. And I honestly don't know how you find the strength to do what you do. But thank you for what you're doing. And I think everyone in this community wishes you and Afghanistan a beautiful future. Enough of this pain and this war and this fighting. Enough. You know, we wish you better times ahead, sir.
Well, thank you. For me, it's not courage, because I don't know how to define it. You know, when they sent rockets, I opened my chest and I said, I'm not wearing a bulletproof. That was my inauguration, and it became a national gesture. What I don't give to is fear. I have no fear. I've lived a life. I've lived multiple lives. And this life is dedicated to service. What inspires me is the decency, the incredible generosity, the sense of appreciation. When a young girl looks at you and says, you've made it possible for me to dream to be president, what price can you put on that? When a widow embraces you and says, I've lost 3 sons, but I'll give the other 2. We are a hopeful society. What makes me wake up with hope, no matter what the previous day has been, is that I know I have a master. My masters are the people of Afghanistan, for they are the ones to be appreciated. I'm just a simple, a human being with all the hopes and challenges, but they want a translator that can hear them, that can assemble it back. And I'll just end with a story. I went to Orizgan, one of our poorest provinces, in 2003, 2002. And I listened to the people the usual way that you've described, sitting all of us. And then I said, how do you want it done? And they started laughing. And I was taken aback because I'd gone after 24 years. And I said, have I made a cultural mistake? They said, you don't know who you are. And I was puzzled. I said, who am I? They said, during the collapse of the Taliban and coming of the Americans, we used to listen to you every day on the BBC and say, next day in the mosque, get together and say, Ashraf Ghani said this. Go get it done. You've come back. It's trust. This trust is really fundamental. It's inspiring, and thank you for your support. We count on it as always, and I'm looking very much forward to welcome you back. Afghanistan has been home to you, and again, we would like it to be home to you and to millions of our friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghani, for those words and for this conversation together. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.